Good evening and welcome to the Ombudsman program. My name is Diane Welborn and I'm going to be the host for this evening's program. I'm very happy to bring to the viewers this program about the Montgomery County Land Bank and a program for foreclosure mediation. I'm going to be joined tonight by two guests, and I'll go ahead and introduce them now. I have with me tonight Carolyn Rice, who is our Montgomery County Treasurer. Thank you so much for coming on the program.
Well, thanks for having me.
Yes, and we also have with me tonight Mr. Alfred Patterson, who is the Home Ownership Manager at County Corp, at the Housing Source. Did I get all of that correct?
Indeed you did.
Good, good. Thank you also for joining.
It is my pleasure.
This is
Thanks
wonderful. I want to remind the viewers that this is a call-in program, and so if you have a question on the topic that we're discussing, we would very much like to hear from you. So without any further ado, I'd like to find out something that I'm not sure I could describe very well, and so I want to bring this information to our viewers as well. Tell us exactly what is a land bank.
Well, a land bank it's also known as, like ours is called the Montgomery County Land Reutilization Corporation, and that's a mouthful, so
right.
Everyone calls them land banks. But the name really tells you a lot about it. It's about how to reuse land. And so what it is a public nonprofit that can acquire, manage, rehab, demolish, sell, vacant and abandoned and tax foreclosed properties in order to take them from a blight condition where they're really an eyesore and really a drag on the community, and hopefully find a new purpose for it and turn it around and help stabilize not only that piece of property but the surrounding street and even neighborhood and ultimately our community.
Okay, well that certainly is an excellent description then. Why don't you tell us about the history of the creation of the land bank that we have here in Montgomery County?
All right, the term land banking's been around since the 1980s, and that would be a more passive model of land banking than what we have today. What we have today in Ohio is a very robust model of land banking. And so if you've heard about land banking, we're kind of talking about that plus much additional powers and authority that it has from years ago. So what happened was, the predatory lending crisis, loss of jobs, loss of population. So our community and many, many others have been hard hit by vacancies and foreclosures and ultimately properties that just don't have buyers. And, as the county treasurer, they also have, most times, taxes are delinquent.
Right.
And so this was happening throughout the country, but especially in the Midwest, our problems were just what I've described. And so when the Great Recession hit, we had already experienced, a good decade of issues and foreclosures being at high levels, and that just exacerbated the problem. And we really came together as a state, many county treasurers and folks who are really concerned about this type of issues, and really came forward with an idea we modeled it, we have to give credit to Michigan, Dan Kildee, who's now a congressman, but at the time he was the Genesee County, Michigan county treasurer, and they had really been kind of a pioneer in this idea. So what we did in Ohio was to go to our legislature, and this was really led, the efforts at the time, by the Cuyahoga County Treasurer, Jim Rackauckus, and Gus Frangos. And they really worked with all of us in especially big urban counties to work on legislation. So what we did, we went to the legislature, and initially they just okayed the idea of the land banking that can acquire, manage, all of those things I just described. They only gave it initially to Cuyahoga County as an experiment. But the rest of us said, we can't wait, we can't afford to wait 5 years. So that would have been about, I believe, in 2008 that they were given a chance to start it. So they were the first. They worked with us, and we worked with the legislature, and I believe it was actually signed into law. So the role that I played and the journey that we've been on is that before it ever was the legislation that we have today that gives the authority that the Land Bank has, I've been a champion, and many others in our community. And we worked with the legislature. I've testified before both a House committee and a Senate committee, watched the vote on it when it ultimately came up for a vote. Actually, a number of us got invited to actually witness the governor signing the legislation. Now Mayor Nan Whaley was there, and County Auditor Carl Keith joined me at that moment. So it was a culmination of several years of activity. But now we have the opportunity to actually have a land bank. So that was passed, I believe, in 2010, and we actually created our land bank here locally in 2011.
That's just really very, very recently for us then. What do you think were some of the factors that helped the legislature to make it a more robust law that you described, rather than kind of how it started in the beginning?
Right, it was much more passive in the past. Honestly, it was a recognition that the housing market, the markets just weren't working, and there weren't really good ideas of what to do with all the volume and the scale of vacant and abandoned properties that we have, and the fact that we've all been witnessing the decline of property values in many parts of our community, and what to do. And this was passed very much a bipartisan vote. So in what can be challenging in the legislature to get both sides of the aisle to agree, this is one of those that had very few nay votes. So it was really a recognition that we needed to do something, that we really needed to come up with some creative ideas of how to get things moving. And so they gave the powers to the land bank. Now, what I will say, and I don't believe I've covered it yet, what makes it different, we have a crisis, right?
Yes.
We continue to have this crisis. But what the land bank can do is that it can, when it acquires properties, it can wipe out those taxes and clear the title. And that has been, for many of these properties that are upside down or have lots of legal issues, have been standing in the way. So it's not something you do blanket across the board, but for those strategic projects that the land bank's going to acquire, this can be, just what's needed to help give it a look from people and give it a chance for another purpose.
Right, because with all those encumbrances on it, it's going to be very, can't get anybody to come in it.
Right. Normally
Right.
you have to pay those
Right.
all off,
Yes. Yes.
and no one is going to pay more than what a property is valued,
Right.
back taxes
Right.
or assessments or whatever is
Exactly.
due on it.
Exactly. Well, with every program that we have to have funding for that program as well. So can you talk to us about the component that brings some funds in to make this possible?
Certainly. Well, initially our land bank was created, but we didn't give it sustained funding. So the initial startup funding, actually I pledged and did provide $100,000 of startup money, which is an allowable use of one of my reserve funds. And I'm going to give you a name that's kind of convoluted. It's a long name that no one will remember, but it's called the Delinquent Tax and Assessment Collection Fund. And what that means is that for every dollar of delinquent taxes that are collected, 5 cents is split between my office and the county prosecutor's office to fund our delinquent collection activities.
Okay.
All right, so, but 95 cents of every dollar gets distributed back to the jurisdictions that it's owed. What this legislation allows is for another 5 cents of those delinquent taxes that are collected to go specifically to the land bank. Now, like I said, we didn't initially do that, but we eventually did last February. The Board of County Commissioners approved that, and so we now have that funding that we can count on year after year after year. And it's really an investment in part of all the jurisdictions to do something, use this tool to turn the properties around. And so that is the main funding. I provided the first $100,000 out of that reserve fund that I just told you is the 5 cents of every dollar. But moving forward since February of last year is that when we collect taxes twice a year, 5 cents of every delinquent tax dollar that we've collected will go to the land bank. And that's about $1 million a year is what we're planning on.
Well, then that is money that can go to help these properties to be reclaimed.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I can also look any citizen in the eye and say, if you're paying your taxes, you're not contributing even a penny towards this funding that the land bank's doing. So it's coming from those property owners that are delinquent, the penalties and interest that they pay. Part of that is being funneled to us to help support these activities and turn these properties around.
Right. So that's great. What are we will be bringing you in here, Alfred, because the people that live in the homes before anything comes to being at that stage is what we want to also include on our program this evening. But what are some of the most common paths for a property to enter our land bank?
Well, we've taken a very conservative approach in Montgomery County. So what you would see in Cuyahoga County, much different than what we did here. And so we basically don't really bank land at this point in time, which sounds kind of, wait a minute, you're a land bank, you're not
But you
banking.
don't bank land.
But when you bank that land, then you have to take care of that and maintain it. And what we have done up to this stage is to really serve as a pass-through. We're a tool for the jurisdictions within our county who have memorandum of understanding with us that they want to participate in land banking activities. So the entity that really is driving the transactions that we have are the jurisdictions. So we're here as a tool to help them accomplish projects. So it's typically very strategic projects that they want. They've found an owner, they bring them forward, they vet them, they come to us and say, we really want this project to happen. We obviously, we have a board, we review it, and then we would support it.
Okay. So it's the jurisdictions themselves that are identifying the pieces of property that they would like to see or find that they have the largest probability of being turned around.
Right. So, I run into people all the time. They say, boy, do I have a piece of property for you
I bet they
that
do.
I would like to get rid of.
Yeah.
We understand that, but we suggest that they go and talk to their jurisdiction and see, whether that be the city of Dayton, the city of Kettering, wherever they live, city of Trotwood, and see if there is an interest on the part of the jurisdiction, that they have a purpose in mind. The land bank just cannot possibly absorb all the properties that people want to get rid of. Now, we do have to foreclose on these properties. We initiate a tax foreclosure, and often if they're vacant and abandoned and no one's to be found, they will go through the Board of Revision foreclosure. So there is a legal process. We don't just take them. There's all, notice and all of those legal things, so it cannot happen overnight. But I would suggest anyone who has a piece of property that they think, they would like to see something done with it, that they go to their jurisdiction first.
That's a very good point, and in fact was going to be a question I was going to come to later. Do they call you directly? But no, they go to their jurisdiction.
There's always question. We're willing to talk,
Sure.
but really in most cases we're going to send you back to the city or the township that you live in. So I would start there, see if they have an agreement with us, see what they have going on, and then we go from there.
And then is it also the jurisdiction that makes sure that there isn't any kind of environmental hazard or mess on this property? Do they check that out before it comes forward? Or
Absolutely. In most cases, especially with residential, the main concern would be asbestos. And quite honestly, in most of these cases, it's just passing through us for maybe a few minutes or a few days in order, and they've got someone in. I can tell you one commercial property where they knew that there was environmental issues, and so it wasn't a residential. They came to us. It was the city of Dayton. It was the Dayton Electric Plate site, if you remember that. That's just east of Children's, and they had known that there was potential environmental issues there. However, the developer who was going to redevelop it, was totally aware of that and was planning to use Clean Ohio funds to, kind of going through the land bank made it feasible to do the project. And then they applied the city with the redeveloper to get the funding to do the assessment and, take it to the next level. So they knew going in what they were
and they had a
agreeing
plan
to.
for how to
And they
fix
had a
it.
plan,
Yes.
and they had the means
Right.
to do the testing so that we could continue forward. So that's certainly a concern that everyone thinks through.
And so when a property is leaving the land bank, there is normally then one purchasers out there ready that it's already been worked out. So you really don't have a lot of bidding back and forth for
No,
those
at this
properties.
stage in our development, we are not. So that doesn't mean 5 years from now or in the future that things wouldn't change as we add programs
Right.
and whatnot. But at this stage, we're really a tool for the jurisdictions and helping to make things happen.
Okay. And how, approximately, I don't expect exact number, but approximately how many properties have been through this
If I had
process?
to guess right now, we have done a lot of, we have worked with jurisdictions between their side lot programs and different things. We probably have done several dozen ourselves. I know that working with the jurisdiction and using the Board of Revision, foreclosure process, which doesn't necessarily mean it goes to the land bank. There have been hundreds that have made their way into a new owner. So I hate to mix up the two, but I am suing on most cases on both.
Yeah.
But projects that strictly land bank, probably several dozen.
Okay. And has the land bank been in a position to have to decline very many where there were the board just didn't feel that the deal was okay yet, and you're sending them back to say you need to rework some portions of this?
We haven't had an actual deal. People had a property that just wasn't strategic to anyone yet.
Okay.
So we've had to say no,
All right.
and which is a hard thing to have happen, but we haven't been able to. Now, what I can tell you is that and you haven't asked me, but the
It's okay.
The land bank
You
has
can
actually
volunteer.
been very pivotal in the Moving Ohio Forward program, but we didn't acquire those properties. If you're very familiar with that, the Attorney General provided our area about $4.2 million for demolition. But no one participated. There were about a dozen jurisdictions that participated. They didn't actually have to acquire. They took advantage of their nuisance abatement
Right.
authorities and whatnot, and then went through all the legal processes and then demolished it. And then if you had a land bank in your county, we had to be the reimbursement control. So we've helped them in that way. So maybe we've been very instrumental in helping neighbors get down an eyesore next to them.
Right.
Because we've done hundreds. The city of Dayton alone has probably done 500 or 600 properties. I know about 1,200 units so far. So we've helped people, but not necessarily always acquiring properties, but dealing with a problem next door on their block.
I see. And isn't that program one where if for example a jurisdiction puts up 50 cents, there's $1.50 or something that comes, or
what happens? It's basically a 50% reimbursement.
Okay.
So we were allocated $4.2 million. You basically had to spend twice as much, and then when it's all said and done, you got money back.
and
50%
the land
back.
bank was the entity that did that for all the jurisdictions.
Because the
Yeah.
Attorney General only wanted to work with one
Land.
party.
I
Yes.
see.
Yes.
Well, that's had a very positive impact. I know it, particularly in the city of Dayton and
it's
some
really
other
helping
areas,
to get there's just thousands of properties
Right.
that have issues, and you can't do it all at once.
Right.
And but we're working on it.
Right. Well, that's good to get some of those things down. Now, one question about the impact of the land bank and the reutilization of that land up against perhaps private land that hasn't had a problem. Is there a negative impact on the private market from a land bank?
No.
Okay.
Basically, there early on, when it was just an idea, we encountered individuals who had concerns about that the free market would be the solution to everything. When we actually met with them, and they might be investing in rental properties or properties for, purposes like that. They were concerned that they would be competing with us and that we would have an unfair advantage and hurt their investments. But in actuality, after talking to them and for them to realize what our intent is and how we're going about it and how we're funded, that we're really here to help. And if anything, we're helping to stabilize their current investments. So if they have an investment in a neighborhood where we're helping to get demolitions happening or acquiring them and passing them through, actually we're helping to kind of stabilize the values they have. So once we talked about it, I've really never encountered any resistance to what we're doing.
So there's initial concern, but they were
Well, when you don't know about what you're
work.
up to or who, what's your purpose, that's understandable. But we're really here to help. And the legislature would have never given us these powers if we were a private entity, because we're here to help kind of solve an unsolvable situation and
it's a
help
public
the common good.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's a public good, absolutely.
Right.
Now, the housing source is with County Corp has programs of affordable home ownership, right?
That's
Would
true.
you like to tell us a little bit about those?
Well, now, the Affordable Home Ownership Program is not my specific duties
Okay.
at County Corp, but I do know a little bit about it, and I can share what I know.
Sure.
If individuals qualify, and we usually use 50 or 80% of the mean income guidelines, then we do have some properties that County Corp has purchased and rehabbed, or actually we even built some. Those properties are available for individuals that qualify, and there's down payment assistance, and there's programs to subsidize that purchase price so that it's affordable for the potential homeowner.
Okay.
But of course, they have to qualify, and that's the big caveat.
Right, right. And that's a matter of submitting all the documentation about their income.
Yes, all
of
the
course.
documentation about their income, and there's some other qualifications. I think the properties have to meet certain guidelines as far as where they're located. There's certain target areas that have been established for these funds. These homes are built or rehabbed in those target areas. So it's an attempt to also bring back neighborhoods to their full potential and protect those neighborhoods that may be at risk of tipping, if you will. The idea is that we can stabilize neighborhoods by fixing the properties that can be fixed and then augmenting those with new properties that can be built. So it's just an attempt to kind of stabilize neighborhoods and make sure that people still see the value of certain neighborhoods.
If a neighborhood that's viewing this program is interested in perhaps being considered as a neighborhood that might benefit from that kind of help, they can contact County Corp to start talking about that?
They would want to contact Adam Blake.
Okay,
at
Adam,
County
Mr.
Corp.
Blake is the person
He
that...
is the vice president of County Corp, and that's his baby.
Okay, all
So
right,
he
very
can-
good. Well, we wanted to be sure to touch on that then. Does a homeowner have to have a foreclosure action already in court before they turn to you for assistance?
No.
Okay.
In fact, a homeowner doesn't even have to be delinquent at the time that they seek us out. There has to be imminent default, the threat of imminent default at minimum. So if a homeowner knows that they've lost income, or they're in a situation where they cannot meet the upcoming mortgage payment, they can certainly seek us out for assistance.
Okay.
It just so happens that most of the folks come to us, and that's a big issue for us, is that people tend to come to us after they're in foreclosure. And we're more than willing to help. We have the capacity, we have the skills and the means, but it's so much easier and simpler, and we can do so much more if, in fact, the homeowner will seek us out when they know that their circumstances have changed.
And what do you think about some of those dynamics? It's like the earlier we go for help, the more likely we are to get the problem resolved, but people don't. Do they talk to you very much about why they were reluctant to reach out at an earlier point when it might have been more easily resolved?
They do.
Okay.
And that is always difficult because even though anyone would agree that the sooner you address a problem, the better off you're going to be. But there's so many dynamics involved. And when a person is going through foreclosure, when they're having financial difficulty that can lead to foreclosure, the family is pretty much in turmoil. I mean, a lot's going on. And generally, you can imagine that having financial problems creates all sorts of other problems in a household. So we appreciate the fact that there's a lot going on. We just want folks to come to us as soon as they can get to us. The sooner the better. But at the same time, we know that there's a tremendous pressure from all sides. When you wake up in the morning and you know that your life has changed and your income is drastically reduced, or that there's been a significant illness that's going to siphon off a lot of resources, things change. And it takes a while to learn to reprioritize. And then there is always the hesitancy to share this type of private financial dilemma with anyone. So it is difficult, and we appreciate that. We're sensitive to that, and everything we do is very confidential. So a homeowner need not really be concerned about other folks finding out. But the reality is, the sooner you seek assistance, the more assistance that's available to you.
Right. That's a very good point, and thank you for making that. So I hope that anyone listening to the program tonight who thinks they have a problem can reach out and get some assistance with that. Why don't you walk us through the steps that a caller or a homeowner would go through when they're approaching your agency, and so they would know what to expect and what they would have to bring and all of those types of things.
Gladly.
Yeah.
The first step obviously would be to call us, contact us. Now sometimes folks are referred to us. Sometimes they'll call 211, and those operators are very aware of County Corp. So if they're in Montgomery County, we're one of the agencies that they will refer those homeowners to. But when a homeowner contacts us, the first step is to listen. Because generally, when you call us, you have a lot to say. No one volunteers for financial hardship. You know, it happens in spite of everything that you've been able to do. So when folks contact us, the first thing we do is listen. We want them to know that we're there for them. We'll bring whatever resources we can to bear on the problem. But like all things, we've got a lot of people to serve. So we'll listen, we will get an idea as to what's going on, and then we will start to evaluate. Step one is always a budget, because you're in a crisis. So you have to have a crisis budget. Now that is not necessarily always a friendly process, because it's very difficult. I'm not qualified to tell you how to prioritize your money. But I will tell you what monies you need to set aside for your housing. And then you make the choice as to where you'll cut, where you can cut and where you can't cut. That's your priorities. But once you've come to that point, then we will start to evaluate what you're eligible for. Certain programs, as you mentioned, Save the Dream Ohio. There's also the Making Home Affordable program. If you happen to be in foreclosure, then immediately we want you to consider foreclosure mediation, because that's the way to pause the foreclosure process while you qualify for assistance and we get applications submitted and all those other things we have to do.
So once they're in a mediation program, then things get kind of put on hold?
Yes.
Okay.
Now, mediation is not guaranteed. The court has to approve mediation.
I see.
It is my job to make a recommendation to the court that makes sense. Just because you have a hardship, just because you're eligible for assistance, and just because you're in foreclosure doesn't necessarily mean you have to mediate. Sometimes we can speak with your bank or mortgage company, and they appreciate what we're doing to relieve the situation, and they will pause the process themselves. It's not often, but it does happen. But usually we want the court to know that this is a formal situation. The homeowner has requested mediation. The court will approve it. Sometimes they listen to my recommendation, but the court's not obligated to do that. The court has its own wisdom, and we respect that. But when the court does approve mediation, then the foreclosure pauses. And that gives us an opportunity to evaluate and assess the homeowner's circumstances, make application to the correct resource, and then the waiting starts, because there's so much volume, everybody's so backed up, that it takes months. And that's something that I'd want to convey to homeowners, because it's very frustrating, because you know the clock's ticking. You know that the past due payments are continuing to mount, and everyone would like to have some assistance as quickly as possible, but it takes time. And so we caution homeowners, please do everything you can, submit your paperwork correctly as quickly as you can to us. We'll make sure that it's received by the servicer or the bank, that they receive it properly, but then it becomes a situation where you have to be patient. We'll stay in touch with you, but we can't push that situation forward. It has to take the time it takes.
How long does the court usually put a hold on for mediation? Months, are we speaking
It
of?
can be. If the court is satisfied that we are moving forward, that some good will come from the delay, then the courts are more than willing to let the process do what it needs to do. However, if in fact the process is not moving forward, or if it seems, unfortunately, that a homeowner is not cooperating, or sometimes homeowners are confused. It's a very confusing process, and sometimes you get advice from people you trust, and you want to do one thing, it may not be the best thing for you, and sometimes you may make the wrong decision. And so we have to kind of make sure that we cooperate and stay in touch and communicate with homeowners so that they know exactly what's going on. It makes them feel a lot better about the process. Generally, it takes 4 to 6 months. But that's not because of the mediation process. That's because of the approval process for the assistance. Those processes are overwhelmed. So it can take 4 to 6 months, and the courts are very comfortable in waiting that. And I have to say that the bank's attorneys are very comfortable in waiting that time frame too.
It's the homeowner that has the hardest part,
Well,
the
yeah,
hardest
because-
problem with that, I would imagine.
Indeed. Remember,
Yeah.
the homeowner is the one who's going to lose the most
Yes.
if this process doesn't work for them. The banks are banks. They're going to do what banks do. The courts are courts. They're going to do what courts do. But it's the homeowner whose life has changed. And so, yeah, they're the most anxious about this process. And we work extremely hard to make sure that they know what's going on. They're always involved in the process to the extent that they want to be. And so, therefore, that builds confidence in the process for the homeowner and helps them relax just a little bit.
And what entity does the request for assistance go to that you're working with? That
It depends on the
needs-
request.
Okay.
Some go to what's called Making Home Affordable. Now, that's a federal program sponsored by the Justice Department and the Treasury Department.
And so that's where the applications go through.
Well, the application actually goes to a process center that they have established. The Justice Department and the Treasury set up the laws, or the bills, if you will, the mechanism. But the servicers actually perform the task of qualifying individuals for assistance.
Right.
So these applications are actually going to the servicer. The servicer then has some very strict guidelines to determine who's qualified and who's not. And then we are in a position to monitor those guidelines to make sure that if you are qualified, the servicer agrees that you're qualified and you receive the benefit that you're due. But that's where, if it's a state situation, if you're applying for Save the Dream Ohio, which is a great program, that program is actually a grant program. So if you receive benefits from that program, these are funds that you will receive the benefit of, but if you stay in your home for 5 years, you don't have to pay those funds back. And those funds can pay you current. Those funds can make future mortgage payments for you if you're having a problem making future mortgage payments. And then there's a few other programs in with the Save the Dream that are pretty complicated to go into at this point. But they're all designed to help the homeowner stay in the home. And then in those situations where homeowners simply cannot sustain the property, their lives have changed to the point where they just can't sustain that property, then that program offers transition. Actually, both programs do. They offer transition assistance to help that homeowner relocate to something that they can afford, and also help the bank dispose of the property in such a way that it lessens the effect on the homeowner. Foreclosures are processes that can haunt you for years and years and years. So we want to make sure that when the foreclosure is over, that it's finalized, that the homeowner can sigh, take a deep breath, and move on with their life and not be shadowed by this foreclosure process for years to come. And then, if I can,
Please.
if in fact that homeowner is in foreclosure, then thanks to funding from our county treasurer, County Corp has the mediation referral program. We're the only agency that has it. The courts respect our ability to make these recommendations to the court to help these homeowners through this process. So whether it be federal for Making Home Affordable, state for Save the Dream Ohio, or local for the mediation program, we try to use every resource we can to bring to bear on the homeowners' problems.
I see. It sounds like you do have quite a wide range available as well.
We do.
With the transition assistance, do these servicing entities make the decision between financing, or they need to transition out, or is that something that really is a recommendation, an assessment that's made between your agency and the homeowner?
That's between our agency and the
Okay.
homeowner. Now, sometimes servicers will assist in that process. Servicers can offer funding to a homeowner if they would transition out of the property within a certain time, because it saves them money ultimately. But generally, it's strictly between the homeowner and their housing counselor to make that determination.
And how many households have you all assisted, let's say, in last year, or whatever time frame you want to use?
For all of the programs,
Uh-huh.
1,160.
1,160. That's very good. And some with the transition assistance as well?
Very few, actually. There were less
Okay.
than 20.
Well, now that's good. So most of the people are able to then that to then manage this mediation process helps them stay put.
Yes.
Do we have a lot of people qualifying for the if you stay 5 years, it's a grant for you program?
Yes. Well, everyone who
Excellent.
gets that program, that's the way the program works. Now, if a person would decide that at some point they're not going to stay for 5 years, then they would work that out with Save the Dream. If they sold the property, they'd have to sell it for enough to refund to Save the Dream those funds that they advanced.
Would you like to offer us a couple of sort of case examples without any names attached?
I've got a million of them.
I bet you do. Well, at
well,
least we have 1,100 and how many it was.
Oh, and I want
And
to
many
qualify
more
that,
on the
that
form.
1,160 is from all 3 programs. That's
Okay.
from programs, people who went through Making Home Affordable, people that went through Save the Dream Ohio, and people that went through the mediation program. Okay. We've generally, what happens is it's about communication. Most of the issues that we would look back on and kind of shake our heads about, one we discussed earlier was a homeowner who had actually paid off their mortgage. And because the bank that was servicing their mortgage sold it at about the same time that they tendered the final payment, the two kind of crossed. So the bank sold the mortgage, but the money didn't follow the sale. So even though the homeowner had paid off his mortgage, the lien was never released. And because the homeowner was retiring and spent, I think it was 3 months maybe, traveling, they didn't know that this issue existed until they got back home. And they were in foreclosure when they got back home. So unfortunately, it took almost 4 months to straighten that out because the problem just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. At the end, it was quite funny a little bit because we all got a chance to sigh. It ended the way it wanted to, and the relief turned to laughter.
Happy ending.
Yes, but during the process, we were amazed that you can actually foreclose on someone when they have proof. They have a canceled check. We can source where the funds came from. We can source where they went, and you're still foreclosing on this person. It just seemed that was a comedy of errors, but it did happen.
And it seems to also fit into that what you mentioned a few minutes ago, that the foreclosure process can shadow a person.
Yes.
That's exactly what happened to that poor individual,
Yes.
that you were able to get all that straightened out. In what other ways does foreclosure shadow people that they may not realize that's going on?
Most folks, I think, assume that if you decide to allow the foreclosure to go forward, you're not going to contest it. You can't afford the home. You know that you need to transition out of the home, and so why would you burden yourself with contesting the inevitable? And you assume that, well, when the bank finishes the foreclosure, it's done. I don't own it anymore. I can move on with my life. That is not totally true. What happens is the bank is not obligated by law to complete the foreclosure. So even though the homeowner may leave the property, the bank at the end of the process may decide that the house has no value and therefore they don't want it. And so they will ask the court's permission to stop the foreclosure and not carry through with the actual sale, which means that homeowner still owns that home. And that homeowner is still responsible for property taxes, liability, and they have if it's in the city of Dayton or I guess other municipalities, they have an obligation to maintain the property. And so now this homeowner who doesn't think they own a property now is contacted by the municipality and told that they have to do certain things about that property, and that homeowner has to pay property taxes on that property. And if your child were to injure themselves on that property, they would also suffer that liability. Not just a child, but if anyone were, they would suffer that liability. And that's part of what happens when a homeowner doesn't seek out assistance to learn exactly what they need to do, what their obligations are, and how to handle those things. They end up in that situation. Another thing they deal with is the fact that the servicer will often, after a foreclosure, at the end of the year, will send the homeowner a 1099, because the servicer's position is that if you did not pay off the mortgage, then you benefited from the difference between what they sold the property at and what you actually owed on it. That's considered income. And so you receive a 1099. Now, there are ways around that, but I'm not a tax professional, but I would refer you to one that would help you sort through that.
If you receive an unexpected 1099, you want to find out what is going on with that.
Yes, indeed.
Definitely.
Get some professional help.
Absolutely, and right away. Well, then if this property that a homeowner may have left thinking that everything has been taken care of, foreclosure, is finished, and what other than a 1099 are some of the ways that they may later find out, oh dear, this was never finished?
Well, one main way is that they still own the property. That's the big deal, that they still own it, they're still responsible for it. The other is that after a foreclosure, lenders will require you to wait a minimum of 3, as many as 7 years before you can qualify for a mortgage. Now, the tricky part about that is everyone has a friend, neighbor, or relative who swears that they were able to finance a new property in 12, 24 months or whatever. I'm sure somewhere out there that exists. But the reality is people don't tend to tell you the entire truth about their circumstances, and so you're left with just that which they're willing to share, which obviously is intended to make them look pretty good in your eyes. The reality is it's going to take a minimum of 3 years, as many as 7 years, before you're going to be able to finance another principal residence after a foreclosure. And that takes a lot of people by surprise. Most folks feel that after the foreclosure, I've rented a place or I've leased a place and now I don't have that hanging over me. I'm back to work, or whatever the issue was that created the hardship that led to the foreclosure has been resolved. So I'm good as new now, but you're not in the eyes of the lender. So you have to wait until, and I don't know myself why 2 or 3 years makes a difference. I appreciate they want you to be stable, but oftentimes the lender wants you to be more stable than you were when you initially purchased the property that went into foreclosure. So it is a situation where once you've sought out qualified assistance that can explain to you what you're faced with, what your objections are going to be, and what your obstacles and barriers are going to be, then you can make a plan. And that's what people really want to be able to do. They want to be able to plan their lives. They want to know that if they take certain steps, certain things should happen. Not always, but for the most part, if you have a plan and you can plan your work and work your plan, you feel a lot better than if you're just kind of moving at the behest of whatever winds move you. So what we want to be able to do is to explain to homeowners what they're faced with, what some of the options are, and what some of the viable solutions are. Not everyone is going to come out okay. That's just the reality. But you will come out clearer. You'll know what you're faced with. And that often can lead to some clarity and some closure. And that's the key. You want to get the foreclosure behind you, and you want to do it in such a way that you still have a foundation to build on going forward.
Right, and to move on. A couple of questions quickly come to mind. If there is a particular property that that maybe the bank has not finished that foreclosure process, what's the easiest way for neighbors to try to find that out? That the former homeowner that they also think is gone and they haven't seen still does own that home?
Well, it's a public record. All one needs to do is check the auditor's website. That website will tell you who is the legal owner of that property. And it'll either be the bank that acquired the property at sheriff's sale, or it will be Mr. and Mrs. Smith who live next to you for 10, 12 years.
The homeowner, okay. So that would be the first trigger, is to go to the property record and see what that says.
And we also ask homeowners to do that. If you've been through foreclosure, if you're ending a foreclosure, you have to monitor that. You want, if in fact your property went to sheriff's sale, you want to monitor, did the bank in fact convert the title? Do I still own this property? And if it went to sheriff's sale, then I need to communicate with them and kind of push that process along.
Okay. Well, in some earlier stages of this, when homeowners come to you, what if the lenders just don't have any interest in working with the homeowners? I mean, this is one thing we hear, that people can't get return phone calls. They feel like there's just that the lender just won't help them at all, won't talk to them about it. How is your agency able to help intervene in those kind of impasse situations?
Well, fortunately, there are rules that every lender has to adhere to about how they will conduct business. But it's like anything else. If you don't know that they have to adhere to these certain rules, then you don't know which buttons to press. And that's why you need our help. If I need a mechanic, I'm not going to try to go home after work and fix a vehicle. That's not what I do. And you shouldn't think that you can process a complete modification package or deal with the servicer, because that's not what you're trained to do. Come to the professionals. Let us help you. We know how to make sure that the servicers adhere to the guidelines, that they follow the processes, that they give you the benefit of everything you're due for. If you are qualified for assistance, you'll get it. If you're not, then we will seek an alternative. And a lot of these alternatives, you just don't know what they are because that's not your line of work. It's not what you do.
Right, right. So you need to get with people who've got all that education and
Indeed.
that background. You mentioned the transition assistance and that not a whole lot of people were utilizing that because they were successful in
Yes.
staying in their homes. But what does transition assistance look like for a homeowner?
It looks like up to $7,500.
Okay. All right.
If in fact, now Save the Dream has had to end their transition program, but they had it up until recently. But they still have a transition program for individuals that have to relocate in order to work. So if you have to move to find a job,
I see.
then transition assistance is still available for you. If in fact you just cannot sustain the property and you want to step away from it, then Making Home Affordable has transition assistance, and each servicer also has a transition program. They don't advertise it. It's not something that they want to advertise a lot, but we know it exists. We know the groundwork of it. We know how it works, and we can help you realize that transition assistance from services.
I'm being told that we have a caller that would like to ask a question. So I'm going to turn now to the caller and let you know you're on the air and we'd like to hear your question. Go ahead.
Yes, if I am a person who is about to miss a payment on my mortgage, should I call County Corp before I miss the payment or after I've missed a payment or two for assistance?
Before.
Thank you. We'll get him to elaborate for you for you on that. Okay, go ahead.
You definitely want to call before, because generally you've already spoken with your servicer and says, hey, I've got a problem. The servicer says, well, we're sorry, you're current, we can't help you. And that's simply not true. The larger services especially are required to offer assistance even before you become delinquent. The smaller services are also required because they have affiliations with the larger servicers, and some of those responsibilities spill over to them. So if you know that you can't make a mortgage payment, then you need to call us. We will assist you in making sure that your servicer provides for you that which they are obligated to provide.
All right, very good answer. Always call.
Yes.
Don't wait. Don't wait at all. Well, for both of you, do we think that the rate of foreclosure in Montgomery County has peaked, and is that past, or we are plateauing? Are we getting better? I'm not asking you to use a crystal ball here, but you're the professionals in this area. You're watching this, I know. So what do you see in the next time period you want to pick, a year, couple of years? What do you see happening?
We don't really see things improving drastically until the economy really recovers and people are not just employed, but many of people may be employed, but they're underemployed. And I believe, and I have no special crystal ball or any of that, I think we're doing a lot of the right things. The region, we see a lot of positive steps, but until it becomes kind of a critical mass of there's so many more positive things happening on the economic side of it, that I just don't think that we're out of the woods with foreclosures. They tend to go through swings, they're down for a while, and then for whatever reason, banks can start it up again. So we can't look in, as the county treasurer and as Land Bank, we can't possibly know what's going on in the banks. Yes, we have no idea. I saw an interesting statistic that said, I forget the exact percentage, but it was a huge amount of Ohioans are just one paycheck away. It was like 37 or 47% of Ohioans are one paycheck away from crisis.
Yes, indeed.
Meaning that they're hanging on, but you just never know what might happen. You never know when an illness, a divorce, a death, whatever, or a loss of a job happens. So I wish I could give you this really positive answer. We are lower than we've been, but we're still at historic highs.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, thank you for that honest and straightforward answer there. What do you, in a related picture, what do you see for the recovery of some of the property values and related to the foreclosures? And
Well,
About the same, huh?
well, what is interesting right now, obviously in 2014 is a reappraisal year for the county, us and along with many other counties in Ohio. And we will find out the results of that. That is not a program that I oversee. It is the county auditor will be sharing that information this summer. Like I said, I have no crystal ball to know exactly what's going to happen. I'm sure that there are areas where it's fine, but other areas are still continue to be devastated. And the vacant and abandoned property, yes, we're taking down some of the houses, but we continue to have those issues. It's not abating. So I hate to say it, but overall, I wouldn't be surprised if we continue to have some issues with at least parts of the county really having some property value loss.
Do you, how are you all able to look at the future for the land bank? I mean, do you look at the county and talking to the jurisdictions, and do you see, wow, we may have double the number of properties coming through next year, or we think it's going to be about the same? What kind of work is there to look at? What lies ahead for our land bank?
Well, our land bank, I would love to say that it'll go out of business in 5 or 10 years. Yeah. I don't think that's the case. I believe this is a generational type of situation. And I don't know if people want to hear this, but we didn't get into this overnight, and we're definitely not going to get out of it. When we met with the county commissioners last year, a little over a year ago, we estimated at that time that we would need in excess of $180 million to take down all the properties, commercial, industrial, residential. If you had a make-a-wish and you had all the money at once and you could just remove from the landscape everything that needs to come down. Well, our land bank has about $1 million a year. We take advantage of programs that come along, like I told you, Moving Ohio Forward and other things, and we don't know what is coming, but it's going to be a while before we recover it. And until we repurpose a lot of this land and get new ownership, it can continue to drag down those things around it. Now, having said that, I'm not a pessimist. I truly do believe that there are a lot of parties doing all the right things, and once the positive starts happening, this does all add up to good. I am very optimistic about Dayton and this community's future. I think we are doing all the right things. A lot of people are working on all kinds of programs, and if we're each doing our thing, and every house that Alfred can help someone stay in, that is a positive move forward. So I am an optimist, but I also am a realist, and I think we're in this for the long haul.
Oh, well, thank you. It's an excellent answer, I think. And we are running out of time here, so we only have a few minutes left. I'm sure there's a lot I did not ask you that you wanted to talk about, but I'm going to start with Carolyn and ask you if there's a way you'd like to close.
I would just say from the land bank side of things, we're just getting started. We, last November, actually hired an executive director to take advantage of a program. You probably read in the newspaper that the land bank was awarded $5 million for the Neighborhood Initiative Program. Now that's demolition again, but that's not all that land banks are about. But as we add up these opportunities and work with the jurisdictions on very strategic projects, I'm just glad that our community has this tool available. Working together, if Alfred and his folks can help some people stay in their properties, you add all of these things up and it's a good thing. So I'm just very thankful that we're where we are. I think many good things will come out in the future. I don't want to get ahead of myself, but now that we begin to add staffing, we can provide more services.
It's yet another positive step,
right.
Another positive way.
Kind of on the quiet, because until you're prepared to really follow through and do what you say you can do, you don't want to promise
Exactly.
people too much and not be able to deliver.
That's very
So
wise.
we are really setting the foundation for future success.
Well, good, thank you. And Alfred, something I didn't ask you need to say about your mediation program, in
just
addition to call early?
Yes, that's the main thing. But to piggyback on Carolyn's comment, it's about momentum. You know, she and so many other folks are doing positive things. And you start off like everything else, you know, the motion's a little slower, the steps are a little unsure. But as we gain momentum, it'll just pick up traction. And other entities, other folks, agencies will all start to gravitate towards what's positive. But it takes something like a land bank that's not necessarily unorthodox, but ours is unique to us. And the decision is to be slow and steady until we can establish our foundation and then grow. As far as the foreclosures are concerned, they come in waves. And we're going to deal with this until our economy stabilizes, but we can still protect our neighborhoods through the processes like the land bank and some other things that are going on. So everyone just stay positive, keep doing that which we know we should do, every opportunity we have, and we will see our way out of this. But it is going to take a while.
And why don't you give the viewers your telephone number?
937, I'm going to give my assistant's phone number.
Okay.
937-531-6926.
Wonderful. Thank you both
Thank
very
you.
much. Very interesting information shared, and a lot of help available for properties and for people in our community. And thank you to the viewers. Good night.